Welcome to the Fourth and Long Fantasy Football Show with Corey and Justin. Here they are, the Fourth and Long Fantasy Brothers.
Welcome into the Fourth and Long Fantasy Football Show. My name is Corey, and I am here with my actual brother, Justin.
Hello, this is Justin.
We are talking rookies on this show. The NFL draft has come and gone, and we're going to talk about some landing spots, some fantasy expectations, and a whole lot more. Before we get there, you know you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Again, we're just trying to have some fun, but go check us out, subscribe, and leave a review. We'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, Corey. So, hey, NFL draft's come and gone, right? Always one of my favorite nights. It's kind of the unofficial kickoff to the fantasy football season in my mind, right? We've been waiting for it. We get to see where these rookies land. We now have a pretty good idea of what the situations might look like, right? We can speculate like crazy here as we get ready for training camps, OTAs, et cetera. It's going to be here before we know it. Corey, how would you summarize the NFL draft and how it kind of shook out for a lot of these rookies?
Yeah, I mean, it's a typical draft to me. There are some situations with some talented guys, skill position guys who landed in some situations where we might see some success immediately. And then we saw some guys who will land in some situations where it may take a year or two before they actually become fantasy relevant. For fantasy purposes, rookies can be a gold mine, right? Because sometimes they can go undervalued, and then there are times when they can be a time bomb because there are times that people will get so hyped up with the shiny new object. Justin, what do you think about the NFL draft, and what do you think about these rookies and their potential landing spots?
Yeah, so, I think it was kind of interesting to kind of see the draft unfold. I mean, there were a couple definite surprises, especially in the first round. I mean, I think the draft kind of started there at pick 3 when the 49ers went Lance over the noise that we heard around Mac Jones going to the Niners, and, seeing the Eagles trade up with the Cowboys and take Devontae Smith ahead of the Giants was definitely interesting to see. And then you look at, I think the biggest shocker of the first round, at least from my perspective, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, Corey, was Travis Etienne getting picked by Urban Meyer and the Jaguars regime here at the end of the first round. Not a necessary need for that team by any means, with the undrafted guy James Robinson really emerging last year. It seems like a bit of a death walk here for James Robinson. I'm not going to overreact, right? Because the guy's talented. We saw it last year.
Yeah, I don't know if we've ever seen such a draft day loser as we just saw happen with James Robinson, at least from NFL drafts in recent memory that I can think of, because you saw a guy who, if the Jaguars had done nothing, or if they had done something late at running back, this guy would have been an RB1 on some people's boards and an RB2 on other people's boards. He's now a running back 3 at best, and a lot of people have him as a running back 4 or a running back 5, all because of the addition of Etienne. I do think that's an overreaction. Justin, I'll just plug my top 10 video, our first top 10 video posted on the Fourth and Long Fantasy Football Show YouTube site that actually talks about the fact that I like Etienne, but I do think that Etienne and James Robinson are going to be ranked a lot closer than they are currently right now, because you're seeing Etienne being ranked in sort of the high 20s, while rankers are currently putting James Robinson even 30s or even the low 40s. And I think that gap's going to close, especially as we get closer into the preseason, where we'll actually see James Robinson, rightfully so, probably get the first down work, and people will remember, oh yeah, he didn't go away. He's still probably going to be the favorite for touchdowns, at least early in the season.
Yeah, don't buy Urban Meyer's take that, Etienne's going to be just a third down back.
No, yeah, that's a lie.
Yeah, and that Robinson and Hyde are going to split those first and second down carries. I think I see a situation where you probably have Robinson be the within the 20s sort of guy, right? He's going to be the one that's going to be coming out there, most likely pounding the rock in when they're at the 10-yard line in. I see Etienne being probably a guy that's going to be getting anywhere from 10 to 15 touches a game in his rookie season. Anywhere from 8 to 10 carries, maybe 3 to 5, 7 catches a game. He's going to be a guy that they're going to put in space. I think, a lot of teams these days, especially NFL teams, have molded their running back room to be a multi-headed committee, right? Where you've got multiple backs rotating in. And there are situations where, there are plenty of committee situations out there where there are still valuable running backs that can be had. And I think we'll talk a little bit about, both Etienne and then also the other running back that got picked in this early second round, Javonte Williams, and his expected committee here with Melvin Gordon in a little bit, Corey.
Yeah, Justin, that all sounds good. So without further ado, let's get to it.
On today's show,
Justin, let's talk rookies. I've already basically given my top 10 favorite rookies and their landing spots on our top 10 video. So I would definitely encourage all our listeners to check that out. That was our first in a series of potential future top 10 videos. But Justin, let's, for the sake of time, can you give me maybe your top 5 rookies based on their landing spot, their draft capital, their opportunity, and of course, obviously the talent beforehand?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about this in terms of, rookie drafts here, right? You're talking dynasty leagues where, you're picking from the rookie pool here as you kind of get started. And I'm going to say that my clear number one right now is going to be Najee Harris, the running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers here. I think he's got all the makings of being a real true 3-down workhorse. Don't know necessarily how efficient he's going to be, right, with that Steelers offense. That kind of Swiss cheese offensive line that they have tried to improve through the draft, which I don't know. I mean, we'll see. But I think he's pretty much guaranteed to be locked into anywhere from 275 to 325 touches, especially given the fact that it's a 17-game season this year. I think you'll see Najee Harris end up probably in the top 15 running backs relatively easily, just based on volume alone. The next couple guys, I like to put a premium on running back. So you're going to hear me say 3 running backs right off the bat here. And, I don't think anyone's going to be wrong by moving a guy like Jamar Chase or Kyle Pitts or maybe even Devontae Smith above these next 2 running backs, especially in dynasty leagues where you get a little bit more longevity from, wide receivers and tight ends alike, right? The pass catchers tend to have longer careers than the running backs. But with the positional scarcity of the running back position, I'm going to put Etienne and Javonte Williams in that next group in my rankings. Again, just because of the scarcity at the position, right? You want to take that high upside gamble at a running back that could potentially be a top 15, top 10 running back over the next 5 to 7 years. So I'm going to put Etienne and Javonte Williams back to back. They're kind of in a second tier. And then I think for my third tier, I'm going to put Jamar Chase, Kyle Pitts, and Devontae Smith in that kind of top 5. I really like Jamar Chase's landing spot, reuniting with his old signal caller there at LSU in Joe Burrow there with the Bengals. I think they've desperately needed an alpha guy now that AJ Green's kind of faded to the back, and Jamar Chase steps into a really optimal position where this Bengals offense is probably going to be forced to throw a whole heck of a lot. Their defense is not going to be stopping any teams anytime soon. So Jamar Chase could very well step into that AJ Green target share. And then, Kyle Pitts is that unicorn sort of tight end prospect that we've been looking for. And I wouldn't blame people for putting him at 1 or 2 if they were in a tight end needy position and they wanted to go for that high upside lotto ticket pick in Kyle Pitts. And then, say you could throw in guys like Jalen Waddle. Maybe you want to bring in a guy like Michael Carter, Trey Sermon, Rashad Bateman. But I'm feeling pretty confident in that top 5.
Yeah, that sounds good to me, Justin. Just for anyone who's listening, I actually have a different top 5, and I have a different, obviously, top 10 overall, although some of the names that you mentioned, Justin, are mentioned in that top 10 list. So go give that a look if you're curious about who my top 5 and even top 10 rookies are. Plus, there is an honorable mention in there, so you're actually getting more bang for your buck. Justin, with that said, why don't we move forward? When we look back in 5 seasons, Justin, who would you say the best running back and wide receiver from this class are going to be? And why do they stick out in your mind?
So, Corey, I actually want to ask you this as well. So if I'm looking at the 3 running backs here, right? Let's start with the running back position. You got Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams, right? All drafted into very different situations where you're probably going to end up seeing Najee Harris be that workhorse right off the bat, while guys like Travis Etienne and Javonte Williams are most likely going to be splitting work with, James Robinson, Melvin Gordon, et cetera, right? I'm curious, and from your perspective, I think it's pretty clear that Najee Harris is the clear pick for this year. But, if I'm looking 3 years down the road, maybe even as soon as next year in 2022, I could very easily see a guy like Javonte Williams, or even Travis Etienne, if they really go with him, given the capital they invested in him, potentially being a better longer-term prospect than Najee Harris with the uncertainty around the offensive line and then Big Ben, right, as well. I'm curious, Corey, what your take is there as well on that one.
Yeah, so the best running back I think will be I would go Najee even for 5 seasons just because of, again, the draft capital, as you mentioned. But also, I mean, he has the early ability to pave out a job for him. And while we like to look at like Javante's situation and we want to say that, oh, Melvin Gordon's only there for another year, and same thing with Etienne, like, oh, he'll be able to, probably by next year supplant James Robinson. We simply don't know. Sony Michel and Rashad Penny are waving at you from, over there. And they're basically trying to remind you that draft capital isn't everything. And situations don't always mean anything. I mean, Rashad Penny walked into a beautiful situation where he was basically supposed to supplant Chris Carson because he was the better athlete and the higher draft capital. And now, look where we are now. Sony Michel was supposed to be good, and other than one good season, he's about to be supplanted probably this season by a third rounder from the year after. So we just don't know. I will go Najee simply because he has that 3-down back pedigree, and he's clearly going to be given that early situation. Reminds me a lot of the situation like Josh Jacobs was handed a few years ago, where he was pretty much the lone man in the backfield, and they're not exactly setting him up to fail. I understand that there's offensive line concerns there, but offensive lines change so often. Just 2 seasons ago, the 2 best offensive lines in the league that we were talking about all the time were the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Dallas Cowboys, and that ain't the truth now. So those change all the time. That pendulum can easily swing back. I'm going to go Najee for my best running back, Justin. When it comes to best wide receiver, I just don't think you can deny talent, and I'm going to go with Jamar Chase here. I really liked Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith is a really, really small, skinny wide receiver, and that does worry me a little bit when you're getting hit by, 250-pound men running at you full speed. So I'm going to go with the 2 obvious picks here, but I have a feeling you're going to maybe go a little bit different.
I think that if I'm going to pick from a running back perspective, who I think is going to be the best running back out of this class over the next, when we look back 5 years from now, I think I'm going to go with Travis Etienne, to be honest with you. I want to go with Javonte Williams just because he's got the younger age, right? He's got less tread on his tires. He's in a situation where after this year, he could very well emerge as the clear lead back in a situation where, they're really looking for that heir apparent from Melvin Gordon. But I think with Etienne, the one thing that I really like about Etienne's situation is the fact that he's now tied with a young sort of phenom quarterback, right? That's coming into the NFL. That's been, probably the most highly touted quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck back a number of years ago. And I'm going to go with Etienne as my longer term upside play here at the running back position in 5 years that we might look back at being more of an Alvin Kamara-esque running back. And then if I'm going to pick a wide receiver, Corey, I think I'm going to go with your Jamar Chase pick. I think just the stars are so aligned here. Look at a lot of these college prospects that we're talking about, right? Etienne paired back with his old college quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. You look at Jamar Chase paired up with his old quarterback in Joe Burrow. You look at Devontae Smith being paired up with his old quarterback in Jalen Hurts. It's interesting. I can't remember an NFL draft where we had those situations unfold. It seems like, and actually I'm leaving somebody out as well. Look at Jalen Waddle with Tua Tagovailoa, right? I mean, 4 situations where a lot of the fantasy relevant rookies are being paired with their old college quarterbacks. I can't remember a draft where that's happened.
Yeah, that was definitely an individualistic and sort of original aspect to this draft that sort of became a story. One of the other stories, too, was having the unicorn of a tight end being available. And we saw Kyle Pitts go 4th overall to the Atlanta Falcons. Justin, what are the realistic expectations fantasy-wise for this generational tight end?
So I think you have to look at the tight end position as a whole, right? And look at it holistically from, where do outside of the top, 3 tight ends, the top 4 tight ends that you're going to be drafting most years. I mean, to be a top 10 tight end, a top 8 tight end you don't really need to do all that much, to be honest with you. I mean, you're talking 750 yards and 6 to 8 touchdowns is going to get you a top 10, tight end fantasy season. So I think that's well within reach for Kyle Pitts. I think we need to pump the brakes, right? We've seen, tight ends take a little while to fully acclimate themselves to the NFL landscape and to become fantasy relevant. And we haven't really had a fantasy relevant tight end, at least from a rookie perspective, since Evan Ingram back a number of years ago. Kyle Pitts, there's no denying he's a freak athlete, right? He's one of the best and highly touted tight end prospects we've seen in some time now. I currently have him as my tight end 6 in my initial batch of rankings, and I think that's probably where you might see him settle. If if, let's say, a big if, right? If the Julio Jones trade rumors come to fruition and you see Julio get shipped out and you've got just Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts as the two main pass catchers there, I honestly, Corey, it's Kyle Pitts to the moon, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, Justin. As a matter of fact, Kyle Pitts is ranked pretty highly on my top 10 list there. And he is someone who I'm all in on. And I know people like to talk about the fact that the last sort of generational tight end, Vernon Davis, came into the league and didn't succeed. But I'd like to remind you that this, when Vernon Davis came into the league, it was not the league we know now. This is a pass heavy, there's going to be at least 3 valuable, if not 4 valuable pass catchers on a single roster. There's plenty of targets to go around. And I'm just all in. I think this guy is going to fit right in with this Atlanta scheme and this Atlanta offense. This is a team that clearly has the vision to throw. And he right now is easily a top 5 tight end for me. I'm willing to take the risk here because tight end is just such a risky position as it is.
Corey, let's say Julio Jones gets traded. Are you taking Kyle Pitts or TJ Hawkinson?
I would take Kyle Pitts. I would take Kyle Pitts over pretty much anyone after the top 3 elite tight ends.
Wow. So you take him right after Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, and whatever order you want to put him in?
I'm considering doing that, Justin, even before this potential trade could happen. I mean, maybe Mark Andrews. I think I mean, last year I was definitely off the Andrews train, and I made that very vocal statement that he was going to bust, and he really wasn't all that great this past season. He's still good. He's still a better than average tight end, Mark Andrews. But I think Kyle Pitts is way above better than average, and that's why I would just go all in. I mean, you're going to only have to be able to spend, even if you really, really like him, the worst you're going to have to spend is maybe a 6th, 7th, 8th round pick on him if you really want to make sure to get him. And that's not a lot considering that there's a lot of just sort of dart throw running backs and wide receivers going at that time anyways.
You look at a lot of the tight ends after that, right? Hawkinson, Andrews, Goddard, Jared Cook, Higbee, Evan Ingram, Jonnu Smith, right, et cetera, et cetera. And with this, as much of a dart throw the tight end landscape is when you get after those top 4 or 5 guys, I think it's worth the upside shot to take him. And like I said earlier, Corey, right, I've got him as my 5th ranked player in my rookie rankings. But if I'm a tight end needy team and I have other positions secured and I really need a tight end on my roster, I wouldn't hesitate to take Kyle Pitts as early as the number 1 spot here in most rookie drafts.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm with you there and how excited I am about what his career and even this first season could look like.
Yeah, totally agree, Corey. So I wanted to move into our next topic, and the next topic I wanted to ask you about was, who's your favorite late round sleeper rookie here?
So I can go into detail. I can go into better detail in my top 10 video because he's actually an honorable mention for me there, but I can talk about him a little bit here, and that's Amari Rodgers. Now, this might seem like an obvious pick, but I just haven't heard as much hype around him as I was fully expecting. Just because he was drafted late, and we've learned to not trust wide receivers, especially who are drafted to Green Bay or brought into Green Bay, to be Davante Adams number 2. I talked about in the video how I think the Rodgers stuff is all hype. I don't see that actually manifesting in a trade. I think this is going to be something that is eventually going to result in Rodgers making his way back to Green Bay. And I think he's finally going to have a pro-ready slot receiver, which is exactly what Amari Rodgers is being sort of coined as well as the ability to play some gadget-type roles. And I really, really like him as someone who I could potentially scoop up either late in dynasty drafts, and not too late, but you're talking probably 3rd or 4th round, you could probably get away with him. And at the same time, it could be a really, really good play even for this season. So in redraft leagues with your dart throw last pick, I think he'd be a really, really appealing guy to grab and hold on to for at least 4 or 5 weeks and see if it pays off. I know there are a lot of, late round running backs to consider. There are some potential later quarterbacks who might be able to slide into a relevant role with an injury. But for me, it's Amari Rodgers. I think he's someone who the sky's the limit, and that Rodgers to Rodgers connection could be really fun.
I like the call, Corey. I think we've been looking year in and year out for that guy to really emerge behind Davante Adams that really steps up and becomes a fantasy relevant wide receiver outside of Davante Adams. And who knows, man, take the dart throw, right? If you can get him in the 3rd or even 4th round of your rookie drafts, go take the plunge, man. I don't blame that call at all. I think it's a great one.
Yeah, Justin. So how about you? What are you thinking for a nice late round pick out of these rookies that emerged in the draft?
So I don't know how late he's going to go, but I'm going to go with Rondale Moore, who got picked from Arizona. I talked about him on our draft preview show where I mentioned that I really thought he was going to be a really pro-ready prospect as it relates to, a gadget kind of do-it-all wide receiver. I'm going back to the well of Arizona wide receivers after they, spent multiple picks on, wide receivers a couple years ago. They've added AJ Green to that room here. They've got Andy Isabella still there. They've got obviously Christian Kirk, and then obviously Nuke Hopkins is the alpha. So, who knows if he'll actually emerge, but that's a good offense to try to get your horse tied to. And, Rondale Moore's an athletic freak. They took him relatively early. And I think if he's put in a situation where he can get anywhere from 5 to 7 touches a game, you could have a relatively relevant fantasy rookie here at the very onset of your first season. You might have to be patient, right? I mean, but we've seen guys like AJ Green not able to stay healthy. And if there's an opening in that wide receiver room where they like to go 4 wide, Rondale Moore could very well find himself on the field there for the Arizona Cardinals. Don't know that you're going to necessarily get him past the second round of your rookie draft. You'll probably have to spend a mid-second round rookie draft pick, but he's a guy that I like a lot in redraft settings as well as a last round dart throw pick that you can take a stab at and see if anything emerges over the first, 5 or 6 weeks. And if he doesn't do anything and he's not seeing the field, you drop him with very little investment.
All right, Justin. Well, final topic of the day, and it's the big one. We want to talk about your rookie fantasy MVP expectation. It's probably a little too early to dive too deep into this, but just based on now that we know the talent and now that we know the landing spot, who is set up to be the fantasy MVP amongst all the rookies, is it the obvious choice here, Justin? Is it Najee?
Yeah, I think Najee's probably the easy call here for rookie MVP, just given the draft capital the Steelers spent on him, the fact that the narrative around the Steelers has been over the last few weeks that they want to get back to their bell cow ways, right? Tomlin's history with employing, bell cow running backs and getting them anywhere from 18 to 24 touches a game. He's probably going to be the obvious pick in most circles, but I'm going to go with, Jamar Chase from the Bengals here. I think that he's set up to really, really become one of those alpha wide receivers here right off the bat with this Bengals offense, having to probably throw the ball, 40 times a game. There's going to be plenty of looks coming his way, especially with his old buddy there, Joe Burrow, tossing him the rock. Jamar Chase is one of the more polished wide receiver prospects we've seen since probably Amari Cooper back a number of years ago. And I think very highly of him. And the fact that he's paired with his old college quarterback where he had, one of the most prolific wide receiver seasons of all time in college football, I think that really sets him up to be an immediate contributor. And I think a season where you see him get, about, 1,100 yards and, 10, 11 touchdowns would not be out of question here. So I'm going to go with Jamar Chase as my fantasy MVP for the 2021 season.
It is almost summer and football is getting closer and closer. Now we will be back on Memorial Day weekend with our rankings reveal show. Remember to check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. And as always, on our YouTube page, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell, download, follow, like, and comment, whatever else you can do to show some support. I'm Corey.
And I'm Justin.
And this has been the Fourth and Long Fantasy Football Show. We will see you next time.
Royalty-free music courtesy of Ben Sound. The views and opinions expressed on today's episode are that of the Fourth and Long Fantasy Football Show. Remember to like and subscribe.